Let's talk about Doctor Who and Disney. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. Quick Doctor Who video. Some of you may have seen a news report or media report which came out in the last few days from Deadline, which I believe is, I don't think it's a magazine, but it's a website, an entertainment facility that reports on entertainment news, film, TV, and so on. And they put up an interesting piece last week about Doctor Who and its relationship with Disney. Now, as we know, Disney are in bed with Doctor Who and have been since Russell T Davies returned to the show, and I think that it's a complicated relationship. But the BBC, towards the end of the Chris Chibnall era, decided that they wanted to take Doctor Who to the next level internationally and globally. They were looking for a streaming service that would get on board with the series and help put it across to what they hope would be a bigger worldwide or bigger potential worldwide audience. Russell T Davies was already being courted to come back to Doctor Who, and he was particularly interested in the idea of this sort of partnership with the BBC, as it turned out with Bad Wolf, the production company fronted by Jane Tranter and Julie Gardner, who Russell had worked with before on Doctor Who back in the 2000s when the show came back. Stars sort of aligned, and that Disney came on board, and they put a significant amount of money into Doctor Who's budget. But what they're paying for is the exclusive rights to stream Doctor Who on Disney Plus across the world. As we know, the show is being screened on the BBC in the UK, but everywhere else in the world, people watch it through Disney Plus. As I think I mentioned on a previous video, this has struck me over the months as a slightly odd arrangement in a way, because prior to this, Doctor Who was famously reported as having an audience of 100 million in 28 countries because the BBC sold it to individual territories over the years, and it built up an audience in those territories, particularly in Australia, where it was very popular, in New Zealand. The new deal meant that you could only watch it if you had Disney Plus, which I think sort of removed it from the availability of a lot of people who previously watched it on, say, their cable channel or their network in a foreign country. All of a sudden they had to have Disney to watch it. So it struck me that it was probably actually having the opposite effect of reducing Doctor Who's audience. But the balancing act, I suppose, in global terms, Disney being one of the big streamers, potential was that ultimately it could become available or could become watched, which is more to the point, by a much bigger audience than ever before. So that was the deal that was entered into. My understanding, and this isn't anything particularly factual, it's just what I've heard. The Disney deal was to fund and distribute, or co-fund and distribute, 26 episodes of television. That being 21 episodes of Doctor Who and 5 episodes of a spin-off, which is coming, and there may well be a video about that in the next few days because it's Comic-Con in San Diego this weekend. Russell T Davies and the Doctor Who team are there, and it's expected that they will formally announce the spin-off there. So we've had a significant amount of the Doctor Who episodes. There's 9 more to go in this deal, which is effectively this year's Christmas special and next year's season. And the Deadline article this week cast some shade on the future of Doctor Who with Disney beyond season 2. And I think the gist of the article was that Doctor Who's future is hanging in the balance with Disney. But now, we've discussed this before on this channel. I think in a previous video I said that my instinct was that I thought Doctor Who is a cheap date for Disney, if you like. They put money into the budget, but it's nothing compared to the money they're spending on their homegrown shows, the Star Wars shows, the Marvel shows, which have all had a sort of a fairly mixed reception, but I think have been well viewed. Now, of course, we don't know the Disney figures. Disney don't release the numbers. We don't know. The only hint we've had is a site called Flix Patrol, which seems to have looked on a daily basis at what's being watched on Disney. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know how authorised that is. I don't know where that data comes from. But it showed that Doctor Who's figuring in a lot of territories, but only briefly. A day or two after the release of each episode, the show was gone from top tens. Except as was noted, Haiti, where it was up in the top 3 for several days. Why Doctor Who is so popular in Haiti, I dread to think. So it seems that Doctor Who has performed moderately for Disney. It hasn't been a massive breakout international hit. I didn't ever think it would be. I don't think Doctor Who is that sort of thing. I think Doctor Who is a very specific thing that appeals to a very specific mentality. It's very British, and the fact that it's been successful internationally at all ever has been something of a surprise to me over the years, because it does have a very typically British sort of flavour. And I don't think that the Disney deal has changed that. It still feels quite parochial, it still feels quite Disney, it still feels quite small. For all the talk of Disney's budget, which I think makes the budget per episode about 6 million, I understand, again, this isn't factual, this is just rumour. BBC Studios putting in 2 million, Bad Wolf are putting in something, and anything else is money that Disney are putting in. This has apparently allowed greater production values for the show, and as I've said before, and I'll keep saying it, I haven't necessarily seen that reflected on the screen. I don't think there's been anything in the episodes that we've had in the last year or so that the BBC couldn't have done and weren't doing, because I think, and I'm going to go on about these things, if you look at Doctor Who Flux, that 6-part series that was made during the pandemic, there's stuff in there which looks much bigger, much broader, and much more cinematic than anything we've had in the 12 episodes we've had so far. That's just my opinion. You may disagree. You may think that the show has looked huge. I don't see anything different from what the BBC were doing with the show. So I'm not seeing that money on screen as yet. But in terms of what Disney are getting, we don't know. We don't know their metric. We don't know what their opinions are. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know whether they think, well, we're not putting a lot of money into it, but it's giving us content. We'll just keep on putting that money in. We'll have some episodes of a show which comes up on the streaming service, and it's content. I don't know. I don't know if they're thinking that, or I don't know if they're thinking we're not going to throw more good money after bad because this show hasn't delivered for us. And it hasn't delivered on the scale that a lot of people wanted it to. And as I said, I didn't think it would. I've always felt that Doctor Who's audience isn't the big bells and whistles, fanfares of Disney. I just don't think it's that sort of show. And I think that what we've seen over the last year is a show appearing on Disney and not doing much more than it was doing before when it was on BBC America or the Sci-Fi Channel or whoever held it before. It's not increased its global reach. And I think its global reach has probably shrunk because of the way it's just on Disney. So the narrative has been with Deadline is that Doctor Who's on a knife edge. Doctor Who might not be renewed by Disney. And there were comments from various notable Doctor Who fans. I think Tony Jordan of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society had some things to say about the show, talking about how it changes and has changed. And there's been a lot of criticism. We know the criticism it's had. The go woke, go broke crowd, preachy crowd, the crowd who have their other prejudices. We can disregard a lot of that. Doctor Who is an organic thing. It's always changing. It's changing with the times. It's adapting. It is reacting to the world around it. And I think that's what it's doing at the moment. You might not like that, but that is what it's doing. We also had, quite bizarrely, a comment from Jason Quinn, the, shall we say, slightly eccentric editor of Doctor Who magazine, who came up with the quite bizarre comment about Doctor Who's popularity to say, don't forget that when Doctor Who came back in 2005, it wasn't an instant rating success and it wasn't a phenomenon. That's not my recollection, or indeed anybody else's recollection. The first episode, Rose, had about 10 million viewers and surprised everybody by flattening the hugely popular Anton Deck in the ratings. And it went on across that series to rate extremely well and to go down extremely well. And there absolutely was a Doctor Who mania almost immediately. Doctor Who toys were in the shops quite quickly. They were massive sellers. It began a 3-4 year cycle of Doctor Who being huge. So I think that Mr. Quinn is misremembering there, perhaps in an attempt to hide the fact that the season hasn't done as well as everybody must have hoped. But I think it's disingenuous, if not totally incorrect, to say that Doctor Who wasn't a smash hit from the moment it started in 2005, because it was. So anyway, where does this leave us then? If Doctor Who is on a knife edge with Disney, if Disney do say, no, we're not going to put any more money in this, we don't see this one working out for us, where does that leave Doctor Who? And I've seen a lot of people who don't like this iteration of Doctor Who going, let's hope Disney cancel it. It's dead. It's not my Doctor Who. It's dead. Disney will pull out. That doesn't mean it's the end of Doctor Who. It really does not mean it's the end of Doctor Who. And I think, again, I've said this on a previous video, but I wanted to say it again on this one. Russell T Davies himself has said, if the Disney deal ends, it will come home and they'll make it on a smaller scale as they've done before. And again, that depends what you think as a smaller scale. If you think War of the Sontarans or Village of the Angels was smaller scale, give me that smaller scale. Bring it on. So anyway, he said that they can do Doctor Who on a lower budget. BBC Studios will still invest the money that they invest. Bad Wolf will invest the money they invest. It'll have enough money to generate some good quality episodes, I think. Of course, we have to take into account certain issues regarding the BBC itself. Its own funding is up in the air, potentially. The licence fee charter runs out in 2027, and there is talk of change. Interestingly enough, the new government, the Labour government that came in a couple of weeks ago, following the general election, they have rallied behind the BBC and said that the Doctor was huge. They've said that the BBC is hugely important and it must be preserved. So I don't think the BBC is going to be dismantled the way that a lot of the anti-licence crowd keep on banging on. Defund the BBC, defund the BBC. That's not going to happen. I think that unless some other funding method is found, I think the licence fee is going to stay to some extent. There may be other things that are brought in. Personally, my view is I think the BBC is going to be in a better financial position in a few years' time, because there's going to be some sort of licence fee or subscription fee, plus other things that are going to give it a fairly decent pot. So I think Doctor Who is probably safe. Doctor Who is one of the big BBC titles. They're not going to let it go. They're not going to let it sink. They might rest it for a while. We've discussed this before. It could be that they'll give it a couple of years on the bubble until it can be regenerated. But I don't think we can stress enough that just because Disney may not pull out, if they do pull out, skies are falling, it's not the end of the world. It'll be a disappointment. It'll be a slight embarrassment, perhaps, that the show wasn't able to make that hop and a skip into a big arena, playing with big boys. But as I've said, I never felt that was always going to happen. So that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. And I think we also have to say perhaps the season itself, entertaining as it was, it didn't hit you around the head in the way that previous seasons have. And I think when you compare what we had in this season with what Russell T Davies did originally, which was fizzing with energy and vitality and excitement, this just seemed a little softer and a little underachieving. And it surprised me, because I'm a big fan of Russell T Davies and I really thought he had some big ideas. We've yet to see them, really. A lot of it seems quite familiar. So anyway, if Doctor Who comes back home, it comes back home with its tail between its legs, and it will carry on in one way or another at some point. As I said, it may be rested for a little bit while the BBC have a rethink. But I think Russell T Davies is saying he seems quite keen to carry on. So I think that we'll just see it becoming entrenched back home, and it will go out across the world the way it used to do. So, once again, to all those idiot fans who are screaming, Doctor Who is dead, Doctor Who is dead, RIP, it isn't dead, it isn't dead. It will just regenerate. It will come home and it will be reborn in another way, a different way, a cheaper way. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think the important thing to come from this Deadline article is, one, no decision has been made yet regarding Disney. I still think that they will fund it a bit longer, but I think what happens after that depends on how season 2 does. I think they will want to see better figures and better audience retention for the second season before they commit beyond that. But I think at this stage, I think they might say, well, let's see where we go with the third season. That's just my gut instinct. I have no information, I have no insider knowledge, but my gut instinct is that Disney will stick around for another year after this. But if they don't, and if they say, well, thanks, but no thanks, we don't really want any more of this, it's not the end for Doctor Who. That's the important thing. Doctor Who will return. It'll be back on the BBC, funded in a different way, distributed a different way. It will have tried something. And in a way, it reflects what Doctor Who's done creatively over the years. It's tried different things. It's tried different types of story. It's tried different styles of production. And this, in a way, can be seen as another attempt at Doctor Who's doing something differently. And as has happened in the past, sometimes Doctor Who tries things and they fail. This may be one of those things that's failed. So it's not the end of Doctor Who. Even if Disney say, no thank you, then it's a question of retrenching, reconfiguring, and reevaluating how best to make the show. So it's not the end for Doctor Who. And I think that's the important thing I wanted to get across in this video for people who might have seen this article and thought, it's the end, we're doomed, Doctor Who's finished. It isn't finished. It isn't finished by any measure. It will continue. In an uncertain way, because we don't know. But I think that the BBC won't want to abandon this show that has 60 odd years of history, 60 odd years of domestic popularity, and whatever you think about how it performed in the last season, it was still quite popular in a current TV landscape, terrestrial TV landscape. Every episode bar one was in the top 20 of the week. The ones that figured lowly because there were mass episodes of other shows, football, X Factor, or Britain's Got Talent, or whatever it's called. So it was always doing okay, just not doing exceptionally, and I think that's what we've been used to with Doctor Who. So anyway, Doctor Who ain't dead. Don't believe the hype, don't believe what the internet losers tell you, the clickbait losers. Doctor Who will just change again. It will have tried something different, and it will just come back, and it'll be made in a different way. So it won't be the end for Doctor Who. Right, thank you for watching this totally rambly video. I just decided to do this entirely off the cuff tonight. It wasn't planned. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Why not let me know your thoughts about the future of Doctor Who? If, and as I've always say with these Doctor Who videos, if you're just going to go Doctor Who's dead, go woke, go broke, those comments won't see the light of day, because I will put, for a little while, I'll put the filter thing on so I can just look at the comments, because I'm just not interested in those sorts of comments. If you've got anything constructive to say about where Doctor Who is, what it's achieved, what it hasn't achieved, where it might go, what the Deadline article made you think if you've seen it, and it's online if you want to go and have a look at it. Yeah, leave a comment down below, but say something sensible. Don't just RIP Doctor Who share, because I'm not interested. Right, thank you for watching. I will see you soon. Till I do. Oh yeah, like and subscribe, do all that sort of subscribey thing. Still not getting much in the way of new subscribers. I don't quite know what to do really. I know I'm doing lots of film reviews and retro movie reviews, but they're not attracting much interest. The Doctor Who stuff does, and as I said before, I don't want to just keep churning out Doctor Who stuff, especially when the show's not on the air for the next few months. So just subscribe. Just subscribe. Go on. If you've come across this and you've quite liked it, just subscribe. There will be more Doctor Who stuff, but there's lots of other stuff as well, so hang around. Why don't you? I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.